Welcome to Hospitality Internships, the premier global talent network.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good wherever you are. I am Dr. Tom Pedron, and I am going to be the moderator for today's session on leadership styles. We have three distinguished colleagues here joining us today to talk about these different kind of areas about leadership. But first, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, if hopefully all of you have gotten through the Taylor Swift new album. And if you haven't, well, you can do that right after the session, okay? But we're going to hit it strong, right? So
that's why I was late to our other meeting.
Without further ado, I would like to introduce our wonderful panelists, beginning with Ms. Allison Scribner Minor, Assistant Lecturer, Hospitality Management at Miami University of Chico. Returning champion, Dr. Christine Cleaver, Associate Professor of Practice at School of Sport, Tourism, and Hospitality Management at Temple University. And Buki Abdul, Senior Career Coach at University of Tennessee at Knoxville. Thank you so much for joining us today, ladies. I appreciate it. I look forward to a great session with you. Let's begin by talking about learner to leader, okay? And experiences of our learning moments. You know, what shaped your journey when you're thinking about yourself as going from a learner to a leader? What kind of experiences did you have in those different moments that created who you are today as a leader? Christine, please begin.
Sure. So I think I'm kind of the term fake it till you make it. So when I worked for Live Nation, I was thrown into situations that I'm like, I don't know if I have the skill to do this. And it was definitely, fake it till I make it. But my boss said to me, I'm putting you in this position because I feel like you can rise to the task and I'm empowering you to do that. And that, just him saying that to me, I was like, you know what, I can do this. So when I worked for them for 12 years and as I started to hone my craft and get better, that is when I felt very confident in what I was doing. And that, that empowerment meant a lot. I gained confidence and then really was able to lead a team going forward, into doing other projects.
And just to go off what you said, words matter.
Yes.
I mean, that is an example of what words matter to someone who is encourageable at an age of going, I don't know if I can do this, but you can, but it just takes somebody to have that confidence in yourself for you to build your own. That's such a great example. Thank you so much. Buki, what say you?
I think mine is very similar to what Christine said. And I was like, I think there's a trend here about it was an experience where there was an opportunity that became available. And I was told that you should be in charge of this leadership opportunity. And I took it on. And of course, it was like, are you sure you want me? Is it really me you want or someone else? But then I remember my supervisor at that point saying, yes, it's you that we want to lead this particular team and group of people. And I think for me, there was that, self-awareness that, well, if I'm being recognized, if I'm being called upon to take this kind of opportunity, then it means that there is something that they're seeing in me. So that sounds like it's very similar to what Christine said. And I think that experience so for me, it was two things: the self-awareness that, okay, I'm here now and I'm going to make it count, and the opportunity that became available. And I'm glad that I was considered for that opportunity. It was that balance that, okay, I'm here, I'm going to make it count. And it was because they saw something in me. That's why they called me for this kind of opportunity. So let's lead. Let's do it. So yeah.
See, that's seeing, right? When somebody, I always tell my students, one of the things, yourself better than anybody else. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes somebody else sees something in you that you don't. And I'm living proof of that as well, too. Thank you so much for that. Allison.
I think that something that really helped me is that we teach it to our students, but I think that sometimes we don't realize it ourselves, but learning from every situation and see, when I first got into the industry straight out of college, I only looked at those bad situations, right? You do your post-event recap and what went wrong. And you never really spent, a lot of time on what went right. And I think that going from learner to leader and looking at every situation, even if it's the worst job, it's the worst conference, it's the worst something you've ever attended, contributed to, like continuing to learn from every experience, good and bad. I think that we focus a lot on the bad, but the good experiences so that we can continue to build on them. And then the bad experiences, obviously, so we know not to replicate those kinds of things, both personally and professionally, as we continue forward.
I use an adage when I talk about certain things when it comes to that is like, we're human. We're going to think the worst first, right? We love a good train wreck, right? We're going to go watch that instead of something that you're patting babies, right? So when you think about that, it's so much part of what leadership really is, and finding our true selves and what really makes us tick. And that deep down inside us, something's going to bring that out. And Allison, you bring up a good for the next question, talking about our challenges, because we've all had those challenges in life, and especially in our own careers, no matter the area of hospitality, travel, tourism that we've been in. And how did we overcome that? What was this something that we learned from that experience? So let's begin with Boogie. Boogie, what would you say?
Yeah, so I would say that one of the major challenge for me was learning to lead my peers. So I think even generally, you're probably going to be in situations where the people you're leading are probably older than you, or they're your age mate, or they're your peer mates. And then it feels like, oh my gosh, why am I the one taking over this opportunity and leading these people? But again, going back to the first thing I said earlier, it was recognizing the fact that I was selected for this. And because of that, that empowered me to move through that, well, in this case where I've been selected to lead my peers, I'm going to recognize the fact that I understand what the people I'll be leading, where they're coming from. I'll use that as an advantage to be able to lead them well, because I would think about it, how would I prefer to be led? Right. So there was that I thought about. But again, recognizing that I was chosen for this. And so I'm going to lean into that, to use that to understand how to lead my peers, because thinking about how would I prefer to be led? What's a good follower? What's a good leader from that lens, coming from that. But the biggest challenge, again, was just, oh my gosh, I'm going to be leading people that we've probably been friends and just colleagues or things like that, or people older than you and things like that. So it was that challenge, but I was able to navigate that with that.
Great. Thank you very much. Allison.
I think the biggest challenge I had was admitting when I didn't know things.
Oh, yeah.
I think that leaders that I had always had the answer. It didn't matter if it was right, but they always had an answer. And I think that a challenge that I had to get over was, whether it's in a classroom and you're in a major and you're in charge of hundreds of students, or you're at a hotel and in charge of hundreds of employees, like Thomas said, we're human. We don't know everything. I wish I did, but I don't. And I think that being put in a leadership role and having to admit that I didn't know something and I needed, a subordinate's help was one of those things that was super embarrassing. Like, I can't tell them I don't know this. Mm-hmm. There's a reason that you're leading them, like you were chosen, right? But there's also a reason that there's 100 of them helping you in this great grand scheme of things, because you can't do it all. And I think that was a super challenge for me, was to get over being like, hey, I know you're new here, but I heard that in your old job, you used to fill in the blank. Do you think you could help us? Whatever it is, something like that.
Think about that humility, right? Just learning for ourselves of going, we can learn from others. Every moment is a learning experience. And thinking that we know all the answers. I always say, I don't know all the answers, but I bet you I know somebody who does. And that's kind of how I kind of go with it as well, too. So Allison, I completely understand that scenario again. And Allison and I have a very similar background as well, too. So we really understand these things that are going on. Christine, how about you?
So one of the most challenging situations in my work career that I was ever in was I was hired into a director role. And when I went into that role, 2 of the individuals on my team had actually interviewed for that role. So, and I did not know this. So I went in like, ooh, happy daisy. We're going to be a team. And they did everything in their power to make things as hard as possible. So I really had to take a step back, and I started taking them for coffee and just having like one-on-one conversations of what works here, what doesn't work here. I don't know why you aren't selected, but I do want you to be part of this team. So tell me about yourself. Tell me what some of your challenges are. Tell me what you think some of your, best, assets are, so we can formulate a team and be able to work together. That took 6 months. So I literally had to prove myself more in that role than I ever did on anything. And if I slipped up, they were definitely ready to tell me. So it was stressful. In the end, I feel like a very good team was formed. I feel we accomplished a lot. But, part of that too was the communication. The organization was really poor. I'll be honest, I walked into the job the first day and they didn't even know I was coming. So it was really, really interesting. And, I had to really take a step back again, Allison, having to admit sometimes I didn't know anything to that team. I felt like I was going to get eaten by alligators. So it was really, I learned a lot about myself, and, I had to like employ some techniques. Like I started doing things like, hey, let's do a potluck lunch where we all bring something. So it formulates, like, let's make tacos. Everybody brings something. So we make the meal together. I had to dig deep in in my leadership tool bag in order to really rally that team.
And you talk about a few things like emotional intelligence, right? Working with that team, figuring them out, bringing them to lunch, all the different things with that. But also at the same time, Christine, and actually all three of you talking about all different styles of leadership, right? And we all know those. And that was my specialization in my PhD was leadership. And just learning about all of them and figuring out going, which one is you? Which one am I supposed to be?
Mm-hmm.
And it's really figuring out the ones in each of those that is going to be best for you, that works for you. But it's always situational, right? Each one of your scenarios was very situational. If it would have changed just a little bit, you would have had to employ something else with that at the same time. So we really think about students, those of you who are watching, thinking about what kind of leader should I be? What kind of leadership style should I go to? It really depends. Now, you can take some of the different leadership skills summaries and those kind of tests that you can take to kind of figure things out. But it's really a lot of times knowing the skills that are behind each one of them and being able to use those in different times. And it's kind of like I talk about that toolbox. You could pull it out when you need it. That's really the central aspect of what leadership is all about, because sometimes, and just like Bucky was talking about, and just like Allison, sometimes you have to step back and follow and let someone else lead.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So styles, and that's a good segue into different styles. So what about styles for you to identify and cultivate your own unique leadership approach? What do you think are effective ones and non-effective ones? Christine, how about you start?
So going back, with the situational, every situation has a need for a different style, but some managers, leaders won't alter their style. They won't alter their style for the situation. That is what I think is the downfall on a lot of things. And you see that a lot of times in higher ed, like people only will lead one way, and higher ed's changing. Students are changing. We need to change kind of our approach. And when you're not, when you will only be like, everything has to be this way. And, if you're only like top down and not bottom up, you're not hearing what people are saying. And that's I think where a lot of issues come in.
Boy, have I worked with so many people like that. I'm going through a therapy session right now, just listening to you. Bucky, what say you?
Yeah, so I think I was talking like the later part of the question, like how can individuals cultivate their own leadership style? I think one thing I'm thinking about is knowing your why. That once you know your why, based on the different situations, how you do it may be different, but your why is consistent, right? And so for me as a leader, or as I'm growing to even become a better leader, is understanding that I want the people I'm leading, I'm in charge of, to be better, right? I want to help them become more successful, more like be the better person, better version that they want for themselves, right? And so that's the why. And so in situations where it's like, all right, we're going to be more transformative, we're going to have those conversations, let's do it. In situations where you'd have to be very stern and say, this is how things have to get done, you're going to do it, right? But for me, it's that understanding the why then helps me know the style and the approach to take.
Sure. Thank you. Allison.
I think that, I think I'm gonna to piggyback here off of Bookie, because I think that like when I left college and I went into industry like fully in, right? Not like kind of half in and still completing my master's, like I was in, right? And I sat through my organizational leadership program and I was like, I am not going to be this authoritarian. I'm not doing that. I've worked with them. They only lead one way. Same thing like Christine said. And I really thought like, I'm a servant leader. It spoke to me, right, Bookie? Like that's what I want to do. And then it didn't work. Because I put everybody else's needs before mine. And so I think that, but it's still the same. Your why. What did I want to accomplish? And then how do I get there without compromising this? And servant leaders don't work in every situation. They would be great if they worked in everyday hospitality. I think you're going to find that very scarce, right? But I think that now I take the situational and the transformational, and I kind of have a mix in my bowl, and that's really where I focus, right? We have to adapt to different situations, and we'll adapt how we lead to those situations. But I think at the end of the day, I really try to keep that transformational in my back pocket, because again, I'm here leading students, I'm here leading employees, and I want the best for everybody, for the organization, for the individuals in it. So I think that finding a good mix, I remember in grad school, and I had this professor that said, like, you have to pick one. And we read that book, How to Deal with Difficult People. You guys remember that book? It's old. I have it on my bookshelf. It's yellow at this point. But they were like, you have to pick one. You have to pick a style, and you have to pick, and it was like, okay. And so I was like, I'm a servant leader. I'm a good person. This is what I want. Great. And then you were like, this doesn't, they're going to eat me alive, or alligators, like Christine said. I was like, this is not working. So, you got to dial it back and kind of figure out what your mix is and really try to stick to that, because even in the situations, you still want to have that base of what's my why? Why am I doing this? And I don't want to get away from that just because the situation isn't ideal for that.
Yeah, and when you think about leadership too, especially when we are leading others, we sometimes don't even think about how much we're influencing them. Mm-hmm. We're just going through the process. We're just going through the motions, because this is what we've been taught to do in industry, in education, wherever else our experiences are, whether they were good or bad. And then leadership almost becomes this whole person in itself of like, where did that come from? Yeah. And my students sometimes ask me about this as well too. I'm like, sometimes you're two people. I'm like, well, when I'm on stage, I'm on stage. I have to be a different way. But then when I'm off, if I had hair, I'd let it down. But when I'm off stage, there's certain things that I can do and certain things that I can say that I wouldn't be on stage. And that's kind of like when it becomes very situational, as Allison was talking about. Because I'm a prescriber of transformational leadership. Servant leadership, Robert Greenleaf, as we all know, was my thing immediately, because that spoke to me. But then when I really started studying certain things, I knew that I was transformational. Because going back to what Boogie brought up, I always say what my purpose, my reason, my why is to help. I'm not here to be rich. I'm not here to be famous. I'm just here to help. And I know that's my central. I know that's my North Star. And when we come with that in leadership, it's so much part of it, finding out what everybody else does. And going back to Christine's point, talking about those people who are stuck in their ways. Because honestly, that's the only way they know. They haven't learned anything else besides being that. And it can be older generations. It can be younger generations. It can be exactly the experiences that you had, but also who your leaders and your mentors are at the same time. So we've all had these mix of different things as well when we're thinking about going from a learner to a leader. And I think it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. I think we're all learning still leadership things. We're watching people. We're filing up here in the filing cabinet going, I like what he or she or they said, but I don't like what he or she or they said. And you kind of note that to yourself as well too. And that's how we're all constantly developing as we move through our leadership journey. Yeah. All right. Now, as we've been kind of alluding to here, that continuous process of learning, right? We're always doing it. So what are some examples of your own growth and leadership journey? What are things that have happened in your life, things that happen in different jobs, different situations, that you've kind of seen that growth in yourself and it kind of surprised you? Christine.
So I'm going to talk about something that is very relevant right now, which is our good old friend AI. So I've been doing several talks on this, and I talk about my AI journey because it started in 23, and Tom, you were there at PCMA. We were chatting about ChatGPT. So I put on my backpack and my walking stick, and I checked it out. And by October of 23, I felt like I was in a sports car driving 90 miles an hour. But I'll be honest, and because it's also like, somewhat taboo in education, I really challenged myself to figure out ways to use it, figure out how to showcase it to students, what it's good for. I've interviewed a lot of industry individuals, and at first I went to my chair and I'm like, am I going to get in trouble for doing this? And she said, no, because we need someone to champion this. So I'm pretty proud of kind of how I have like old dog into new tricks type thing, dove in and really am embracing it, talking about it. I mean, I learn about it every day. I'm listening to podcasts and reading stuff. And, I'll be honest, if I'm not learning, I don't feel whole. So I feel like it's a new challenge, and I love a new challenge. So for me, I'm constantly, taking in different things, other things in the industry as well. But AI currently right now is really, I'm on the deep dive of really getting to understand and know how to use it, but also how industry is using it as well.
So Christine, I would venture to say your middle name, I could change it kind of just like mine to Curious.
Yes.
You'd be CCC.
Yes.
Christine Curious Cleaver. Because I think that's really what we're all about, right? We're being that curious part. That's really what leadership is going, I don't know every single way, but if I'm curious about it, I can try to dabble and figure it out. Again, going back to almost like our imposter syndrome, right? Going, I don't know everything, but I'll do what I can do. Here's this, we're all going through this together. That's why there's no expert in AI right now, especially in hospitality, because we're all figuring it out. And I like to tell my students one thing, AI is at its worst right now.
I know.
Yep. Imagine what we're going to be in 5 years, 10 years. For those of you students who are viewing this and going to be leading the world in hospitality, travel, and tourism, the next 20 years, this is the new typewriter. This is the new electricity. This is the new calculator. This is going to revolutionize every single part of our lives. And it's exciting. It's scary as heck. But I like to say, get comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's really what it is. Okay, what say you?
So I think one thing I've been thinking about with this question is the ability to provide very helpful feedback to the people I'm working with or leading. It's something I have had to learn. So I would avoid conflict. I would, and that person like initially, right? But I think learning that, going back to my why, I want to help this person be better. I want to help the situation. I want to make a difference, right? And so there is no making a difference without going through those hard conversations, without going through those difficult challenges, right? And so I think for me, what I've had to learn, I mean, talking about taking classes like professional development classes to help me learn how to be able to provide critical feedback. So how do you provide that in a way that you're not sugarcoating the truth, but you're also not saying it in a way that the person feels like that's the end of the world, right? Because in my role, I have to constantly provide feedback, right? And you would, as a student as well, like as you get into positions, as you become a manager, a leader, whatever the case may be, you would provide feedback all the time, right? And so it's like balancing, being able to balance providing very helpful feedback in a way that spurs the person to make a difference, but also not in a way that demeans their dignity, because everyone has that dignity, and we need to respect that. So that's something I've seen myself learn and grow through. And honestly, I'm still growing through it. I'm still getting there. It's a journey. Like we said, it's continuous. And maybe 2 years from now, I'll have more examples to say, yes, I did this, I did that. But I think it's also a process for me.
Lifelong learning.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, when we ultimately go into education, and those of us being in education here, it's really we're not done. I like to tell my students when they graduate, like, your homework just got worse. It didn't get better. You've got more to do. You're constantly having to work at home as well too, and do the things on the off times. So are we as educators. We were talking earlier before the presentation about summers off. We like to laugh about summers off because we're working and trying to better ourselves. It's that constant lifelong learning and the constant curiosity as to how can I make us better? But remember, I got to be better first before my students can be better. What are the things that we need to do? And as Christine and I, we were at PCMA Convening Leaders in January in San Diego, learning about AI, and all of us literally in deer in headlights being scared of, oh boy, okay, where do we go from here? And just the first step is the hardest. Just put the step right in and start moving, because if you don't move, you're not going to get any part of that as well. So Allison, what say you?
That's so funny because we were all at PCMA and but do you remember January of 2023? Let's go back to Columbus, my friends, because that first one, if you remember that session, everybody was in there and said, AI is going to take our jobs. And I think it was Nick Borelli that did that first presentation, but all he was doing was like, take a breath. If we use it correctly, it's only going to enhance. It's not going to nobody wanted to actually hear what he had to say about it. They were just like, how is this not going to put me into retirement earlier? And so it's funny because I worked for another institution for 13 years. And one of the reasons that I switched was because I wanted to pursue my PhD. Right. That's what educators do. And so it's something that has been a goal for quite some time. And again, continuous learning. And it wasn't a possibility at my previous institution. So I found one that was willing to teach, and I could teach, and this was going to be great. And so I entered into the EDL program at the university. And I sat through the first 2 classes and I was like, this is not it. Like, it is what it is. It's just not it. It's not what I don't. And so I was like, okay. And it was like one of those, again, admitting defeat, right? But I kind of did my homework. I searched around the university a little bit more, and I have a fabulous colleague who is now also a dual advisor, right? And I enrolled in an interdisciplinary PhD, and I am super excited. And I'm bringing this back around, Thomas, I promise. But I have a unique opportunity where my first master's is so old, and that it doesn't really fold into this new one, that I have the opportunity to earn a master's on my way to the PhD because of how the classes are set up. So I am currently enrolled in and almost done. I'm 4 classes. I'll finish them over the summer, our summer off, right? 4 classes over the summer, and I'll finish that master's in a year time. So I started in August when I came to the university, and I'll end in the end of July, beginning August of this year. But anyway, in educational technology, because I don't know how to use it, and I can't teach my students how to use it if I don't know how to use it. So it's really been eye-opening. I mean, it's a lot of AI, right? But also things that, like, you think about, like Duolingo and Kahoot and these things that, like, students use in high school. And we don't ever talk about them in higher ed because, like, they're like high school things, right? But everything is technology based. There is, you can use Minecraft for education. I never knew that. I mean, I kind of heard about it, but I never got to experience it, right? And so this whole year of brand new things for me, like, moving a university is, as everybody in the room knows, is stressful enough. And they're like, are you sure you want to do this? And I'm like, no, but I'm gonna. Because, it's one of those things that that's my end goal, but, like, how am I going to get there? And I have done it so quickly because I'm generally interested. It's keeping my interest. It's something that I need for the classroom. It's something, but sitting in that classroom the first day, and I was like, no, this is not it. I'm not going to make it because none of this interests me. It just wasn't enough. So I think that that's one of the biggest things with continuing ed is to make sure that you are intrigued by it, especially if you've been a professional for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You know, you get comfortable. I don't need another master's degree, but I want one because now I'm halfway in it, right? And I was like, that's kind of an opportunity not to pass up. And that's something that I think that, you know, I have the opportunity to teach online solely at this point. Now my program is hybrid, so I have some other faculty that teach some of the other classes, but I'm teaching all online. How am I going to get that same experience in the classroom if I can't use something else to support it as if they were in a face-to-face class and keep students coming back while everybody that's in a classroom and online are learning in the same way? So I think that, you know, really embracing AI and the technology in the classroom, where if you would have asked me 14 years ago when I started doing this, if I would be using all these applications, I would have looked at you like you had 3 heads. And so I think that, you know, as professionals and as, you know, students that are watching this and are entering, like, just be adaptive. Really, I mean, what's going to interest you, what's going to help you personally and professionally, and what's going to really keep your interest so you want to continue learning for the rest of your career.
Can I add something in there just because?
Absolutely.
So, and I can feel this from Allison, and I think this is something that we have to encourage, is finding your passion. So knowing your why and finding your passion, that is the reason why, again, going to curiosity of why you constantly want to be a lifelong learner. And, you know, when you're interested in something, that is, you know, that gives you the want, the need, the desire in order to pursue it. Sorry, Tom.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Remember, this is always fluid. We're having a good time here, right? But let's talk about leadership for a second. Just it's talking about what Allison talked about, but it really brings back something I really like to focus on when I talk about leadership, is that we go from being selfish to being selfless. And then we add in hospitality to that, which is people who work in that, those of us who all work in it, we are selfless because it is about our guests and our customers and our clients and our vendors. And so when we have to be that selfish part, we're talking right now about our leadership, the way that we had to learn, things that we had to go through, because I have to know it first before I can help anybody else out, right? It's kind of like those who bore you, your parents or guardians who had you. They had to have money coming in. They had to have a roof over your head. They had to be able to feed you and put clothes on your back before you could do anything. So it's the same aspect for us in leadership, is going, we have to be effective leaders. How do we figure that out? Well, we're always never going to be whole, because there's always going to be some part of it that's going to be curious. Mm-hmm. That's an aspect when we're thinking about, as we're constantly growing in self-development, is finding those extra things. And to Allison's point, who needs one more degree, right? Well, I know a lot of people. I know some people with double PhDs, double master's degrees. That's okay. It's part of what your journey needs to be, not anybody else's. So it's so very important to really understand that, recognize that not everybody's journey is the exact same way. Coming from a chef and then going into an educator. Okay, so innovation and risk-taking. Oh boy, here goes. Okay, because Christine alluded to a little bit of this as well too, but you know, we always have to maintain that stability, right? And that consistency in our programs, but we also need to take those risks. And somehow I know Christine and I know Allison. Buki, I don't know you yet, but I can't wait to meet you. But I can probably tell you that there's some good stuff here with this innovation and risk-taking. So Buki, let's start with you. What about you and innovation and risk-taking? What kind of things that would you recommend with that? Trying to keep your place stable, but also being a little bit innovative at the same time.
I think, the conversation about AI helps us know that you're not going to stay in one place. If not, you're going to be left behind. And I think that when we think about innovation and risk-taking, for me, I see it as, so for someone that doesn't change or is not open to change, again, going back to, you will be left alone. You would be left behind. I'm thinking, again, going back to my context still within higher education and working with hospitality students, working with different set of students, is that we're having Generation Z come in, not me even saying Generation Z, I don't sound like it, Gen Z come in, right? And it's that how are you going to change the traditional ways of higher education to meet this new demand, but also in a way that honors your purpose and your mission and your vision? I think that to answer this question, for me to think about innovation risk taking is, what do we need to do to get what we want while maintaining and staying true to the value that we profess? Because if we go after innovation, taking the new risk and going with the wave of AI, oh, Gen Z, they want this, let's give that to them, and we forget the values that we're professing, we're going to get lost in the new wave, right? And in the new crowd. But if we go on the other extreme and say, well, we're going to conform to the values we've always held true, and we're not going to do anything new, we're not going to try anything different, we're not going to take any risk, again, we're going to be left behind. So the balance for me is, how can we pursue this new wave, thinking through AI, thinking through the new generation, filling the workspace, and how can we do that in a way that we remember the values? I think going back to the why that we started with initially, right? You remember the values that you're professing, and you're still going ahead to that. Let me give a very short example. Thinking about short form videos, TikTok, Instagram, all of those things. Higher education has been more traditional, and it's just, well, why would we get on TikTok? What's there? It's for the, but you know that your students are there, and you know that people are getting information, and you know that information is already there. So how would you contribute to the information and make sure people are getting the right information, right? How would we do that in a way that still honors the values and all of that? Learn it, going back to what we're talking about, ever learning, and get on with it, do it. And again, reassess. I think that's another big part of this, is like, assess whatever it is you've done, assess whatever it is you've worked on. Do you want to continue this, or do you want to try something different? I don't think we're in a space where it has to be this exact one thing. It's changing, and so your approach to it will change, but while honoring that same value. Anyway, I went on and on. There's several examples, but yeah, that's my approach to it.
Right? Give us a platform, we'll keep going, right? It's all good. Well, and you know, Buki, you bring up something that's so very important that really covers, you know, our leadership right now, especially today and forever and forward. Right now, in industries across the entire world, we now have 5 different generations that are working. We were in 4 just over a little bit a year ago. We are now at 5. Every single one of them works and lives and acts in a different way. Leadership is so different. They've had many, you know, the older ones have a lot of different experience from different people. They may have been, you know, taught by somebody who was very much an authoritarian, very much a transactional kind of person, which was very typical for those times. Now we have students right now who have lived through what I like to call, again, our unfortunate lockdown, that some of the things they didn't have those kind of personal interactions. So our leadership is so much part of those kind of things that we need to be aware of. And there's what I like to call the moving target. Because we've got 5 of moving targets in front of us. We're hoping to get as many as we can. And that's the difficulty about what leadership is that trying to get everybody is going to be difficult, but trying to figure that out as well, too, is another journey in itself. Yeah. So Christine, what say you?
So I am a pleasant non-rule follower, meaning that my students know this, but also going back to what you're saying, Buki, about the balance. So I have like 3 hard, fast rules in my classrooms. And one of them is I do not accept late work, because in the events industry, you can't be late and the event actually, you know, happen. I also, you know, everyone in the classroom has to be respectful to one another. Like that is very, and then I also create a very welcoming environment for the classroom. So, but at the same time, if you want to be innovative, or if you want to think differently, or if, you know, I don't know, if we're trying to do something. So I have a practicum class that we plan an event at the university. And if we want to do something that's like, I'm not even going to say outside the box, or like way in, you know, the air, I won't say no. I'll figure out how to do it. And if I have to take some heat on it, I absolutely will, because I'll take the heat for the purpose of the students to be like to see innovation. So I do agree, like finding that balance. But yeah, so but I do it in a very pleasant and respectful manner in the classroom. I'll be like, "Ooh, I like that idea. We may have some red tape we have to get through, but we'll figure it out when we need to." And sometimes I don't even let them know some of the things that has to be done, because I want them to celebrate. And I guess it goes back to the fact that someone empowered me very young to do things, that I try to pass that along. But yeah, I'm a risk taker, a non-rule follower. Like my whole family knows. They know, like when something comes out of my mouth, when it's out of my mouth, they're like, "Oh gosh, this is actually going to happen, isn't it?" So, it just, but I encourage that thinking, because I think, and that does, across all of these, generations that, they're happening right now, sometimes it can't just be one way. It has to, you have to think differently, because now we're in a different time period.
And we're expecting you to think differently.
Yeah.
The students are expecting us to think differently. And Christine, I mean, you and I are one person, and brother and sister from another mother kind of thing. But I'll tell everybody, I'm going to drop a chandelier from any ceiling in this entire world. I'll put one up there. You can't do that. I've had more hand slaps, but those are the kind of things where, yes, I take that part. The students don't see that. But in our debrief, I let them know, going, just so you know, this wasn't supposed to happen. But then they see that going, you can take risks. It's okay. It's okay to get your hand slapped. It happens to every single one of us. The important part is that we made that stride. It's like the old saying of, the baskets that you don't take are the ones you don't make.
Mm-hmm.
It's so very important to just take that initiative to do that, because if you don't really know what's going to be on the other side of that, which could be really pleasing to people. And as we are pleasing people, we are people, right? In our industry, it's so very important to see that and to show the younger generation at the same time. Allison, what about you?
Well, Thomas, I thought that I was your sister from another mister, but I guess we'll have to welcome Christine into the family. I very much, like the two of you, like to live in the gray area. I am much more of an asking for forgiveness instead of permission. And that actually that changed about 7-8 years ago. I had a dean and we did not get along. And I bring it up because he was also the same way. And the only thing that we agreed on, and he was like, you know what? I asked him, we were doing some cocktail party out at a local country club. And I said, I don't think we're allowed to do, sir, just respectfully, I don't think I'm allowed to do this. And he goes, in this industry, you need to ask for forgiveness instead of permission. And I was like, And I take that with a grain of salt, because again, some things like ethically, you're like, nah, but same thing with Christine. I can't tell you, and it actually ties in Bookie and Christine's, I can't tell you how much heat I've taken from administration, from other things, but I've never told my students no, unless literally it was going to blow a budget so far out of the water that I couldn't bring it back. But I will tell you that there are reasons that I have moved on to a more innovative program, because I knew that they were not going to continue to grow. And so I am super fortunate to be where I am right now. And they are so supportive of innovation and growing the program and looking at what does higher education and what does hospitality in higher education look like in 2024. And I am so grateful to be there. They're not getting anything from this, by the way. This is just Allison Miner's opinion. There's no shameful plugs in this. It truly is gratitude, because we all experienced COVID together. We all experienced the transition from in-person to online learning. And I truly think that, schools that still have these hybrid programs where you have students that want to be in the classroom can be in the classroom, but students that already have good paying jobs, families, anything like that, where they're like, I can't go to college because I can't give this up. There are programs like mine and Thomas's and Christine's, and I'm sure over there at UTK, Buki, you probably have something very similar that are adapting to what the student needs now, not what the student needed 10 years ago, because even 5 years ago, it's not the same. And the only way that we're going to survive in higher education and continue to vest in and grow that next generation of hospitality professionals is meeting them where they are at right now, not where they were at years ago. And so I really am, excited that where I am now is it's currently innovating so that we can continue what we're doing. And at the end of the day, just like Thomas started us off with, I'm here to help.
Yeah.
And if I feel like I'm not able to help anymore, or I'm not being given the support anymore, then that's something that I have to, I'm going to say the P word, pivot. That's such a 2022 word that I never wanted to hear again, but, pivot to that company, that wherever I'm going that can support that.
Absolutely. And that's how we're built. That's what we do. And that's an important aspect as we, wrap this up talking about, leadership and going from, learners to leaders. And think about that as an audience. Where were you? What is your journey like? Imagine what it's going to be like in the next few years. And we encourage you to really think about and explore the different types of leadership, but also watch what everybody else is doing and others are doing and things that you like and don't like. It's so very much part of what your journey is. And, as an ending piece of advice for you. So I want to thank all of you for joining us today. I'd like to give you a small little shout out to save the date. Our next date will be Friday, May 26th. We are going to be talking about effective communications, breaking barriers, and amplifying understanding. And you'll see us right back here. You'll see me as well, too. I hope you've enjoyed today. Thank you again to our illustrious panelists. Thank you, ladies, so much. Have a wonderful weekend, and I look forward to seeing you in May.
Welcome to Hospitality Internships, the premier global talent network.